Hello, and welcome to Waves of YA, a podcast focused on young adult literacy brought to you by the Ocean County Library's Teen Literacy Work Group. My name is 𝒕𝒐𝒅𝒂𝒏𝒆. I'm one of the teen librarians at the Toms River branch. Joining me today, we have...
I'm Stephen from the Upper Shores branch.
And I'm Chris from the Lakewood branch.
And I'm Melody Simpson, the creator of Melanin and YA, your source for all things Black and traditional young adult publishing.
So today we have our featured special guest, Melody Simpson, who is the founder of Melanin and YA. We'll be looking into the founding of Melanin and YA with a brief interview with the founder and followed up with a discussion on what it means to read with intent. Thank you for joining us today, Melody.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really awesome, especially since you guys are from New Jersey. I was born and raised in New Jersey, so I'm just really excited to be here and represent.
We're
yes,
excited
New Jersey.
Tell us, how did you decide to start Melanin and YA, and what is the database overall mission statement?
I created Melanin and YA in August 2020. If you guys remember that dark time earlier in June 2020, it kind of all came to a head as far as the police violence against Black women and men, just completely unnecessary. And with the culmination of those events, showcasing the lack of support for the Black community, and then on social media, mainly on Twitter, you would see all of these book publishers and just people in the book industry making statements to show their support for Black creatives, Black lives. But they didn't actually do anything outside of that. It was kind of just blanket statements for no reason, really. And so I wanted to create a database that was a no excuses database so that if you are going to put something out there saying that you support us, then you actually have to do it, so that people can't say there are no Black books about this. There are no Black authors in this state. There are no Black editors, Black agents. None of that is true. And so I created the database so that people could have one place to go to, like a hub to go to for everything that they need to support the Black lives in this industry. So as far as the overall mission, I essentially wanted to be a resource that's the premier source for like global content for Black creators. But I want to start it off just with traditional YA publishing, since I'm just one person. So it's hard to do all of that at once, but I'm going to start slow. There are things that I don't yet want to announce because I kind of have like a 10-year plan for Melanin and YA. So I've got a lot in store, but for now, I just want it to be a place that people go to for information. I want anybody to be able to go there, whether they're an aspiring writer, a librarian, a teacher, a publishing professional, or just a reader, anybody who needs information. If they're looking for Black cover designers or Black audiobook narrators, whatever you need, I want it all to be in one space.
Yeah, I know one of the features I was looking at recently was the book release schedule for 2022 and looking at all the new books that are coming out.
Yeah, I'm really excited about what's coming out. And I'm especially excited about the debuts that are coming out. We've got so many debuts. And one especially that I'm really looking forward to is Monarch Rising by Harper Glenn that comes out in October. And we've got just so many debuts every month, and the debuts I noticed a lot of love if they're a particular kind of debut, like a cis white debut, or just a debut that's kind of like that flashy one that everybody's talking about, whether it's lead title or not. But I want people to also remember to support the other debuts that are out there. And especially if there's a book coming out by a returning author who has a backlist and everybody's focusing on that big book that comes out on that Tuesday, but then they forget about the other books that are coming out. So I just wanted to have a nice little release schedule there so you can see everything that's coming out on that Tuesday that you're going to go to the bookstore or go online and order those books that you want.
What are some milestones that you've achieved with Melanin and YA? Any achievements that you are particularly proud of?
I would say that the biggest achievement that I'm proud of is the GoFundMe that we did last year. We raised over $25,000 for Melanin and 𝒂𝒂 so that I would have startup costs for registering Melanin and 𝒂𝒂 as an LLC, for like future things that I have planned. A marketing budget, which was great because I was able to get ad space for a first draft podcast with 𝒕𝒐𝒅𝒂𝒏𝒄𝒄, which was really cool because I've been listening to that podcast basically from the beginning. So to be able to have an ad for Melanin and 𝒂𝒂 on there was pretty cool. But just have a marketing budget for things like that. It also helped with promotion on Instagram and Twitter. That really does help, actually. It gave me a portion of money for the trademark. Trademarking is not cheap, so that helped a lot. And setting up for e-commerce inventory and so forth. So I would say that was the greatest achievement so far. And I'm looking forward to what's ahead. I am hoping to open up an online shop this year and a subscription box this year. I did want to do that last year, at least the store, but that got delayed. I did get COVID myself. I'm dealing with long COVID. So things got a little delayed last year, but I'm back on track now. And I'm really excited for what's ahead. And I feel like as much as I have accomplished for Melanin and 𝒂𝒂, it's kind of hard to think about what I've achieved so far when I know in my head, like, I really haven't even touched the surface yet. So some people are saying, oh, you did this, you did that. And I'm like, yeah, but because I just see like so much more happening. So that is a great question. I do also have to like sit and think about what else I actually did, because people tell me all the time, but it kind of goes in one ear and right out the other, because I'm just like, no, but you don't understand. There's so much more coming. So yeah, I do need to take more time to just sit and really just be thankful for the people that do come to me, whether it's via email or social media or whatever. And they're like, your website really helped me. Those moments, they come at the most incredible times, because sometimes I'm working on Melanin and 𝒂𝒂 and I'm like, this is so hard. It's a lot of information that I'm updating. And especially with the long COVID, my fatigue has been just absolutely dreadful. And so I know sometimes I feel like I'm behind, but nobody else is really noticing, but I notice. And so I do need to really just enjoy when people compliment Melanin and 𝒂𝒂 and tell me when it has helped them, and just really see it. It's working. It is working. It's doing its purpose, and I need to live in that moment and appreciate that a little bit more.
Yeah, your GoFundMe got funded in a couple hours, didn't it?
Well, we hit the halfway mark in a couple hours. And like that was so fast. It was a lot faster than I thought it would. I didn't even want to do it, honestly. I was like, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I was unemployed at the very beginning of the pandemic. So I was like, I know other people are unemployed now too. And I was like, I feel weird asking for money right now. And I did not want to do it, but I was like, I need money for this. And so my friends were like, just do it. You'll get the support. And I was like, okay. So I did it reluctantly. But I'm very glad I did. I was floored, truly just floored by the amount of support. The book community is something special. I'll say that. They really are amazing.
Awesome. Okay, so our next question, what can our listeners do to support you and your website?
Well, I would say word of mouth is so important. I don't think people realize how much power they have when they just talk about the things that they love. And so whether it's talking about it when you're in your daily life, at work, at the grocery store, at the bookstore, wherever you are out in real life, even if it's limited right now, the opportunity naturally arises to mention Melanin and 𝒂𝒂, please be sure to do that. You're on social media, whether it's a retweet or an Instagram story or something to just spread the word about Melanin and 𝒂𝒂. If you want to donate once, you can do so. There's a link on our website. If you want to support us financially monthly, we have a Patreon. And the Patreon, if you support at a certain level, you get a Patreon box. So you get a book every other month after you support for 6 months. And just a book and other things in there. So far, I've gotten nothing but amazing responses from the box that I do. So that's really exciting. But yeah, I would say just word of mouth. When we open up, I say we, but it's me. When I open up the online shop I'm hoping to open up the online shop in the next month or two. So that would be a great way to support as well. It will just be like mugs and coasters and tote bags and t-shirts, stuff like that. That would be a great way to support as well.
I was just going to ask what kinds of stuff you were planning on having in your shop. And I'm glad that it's, things like mugs, because I'm like, can I get myself some Melanin YA swag, right? Like I want a t-shirt. That's amazing. I really can't wait for that to launch. That's going to be a really great feature in addition to all the amazing features that this database has already. So really looking forward to that.
Thank you so much. And it was funny because the people who are on the Patreon who do get the boxes, over the past year, since the the past few months, I would say, since the GoFundMe, I've been able to get, I would say, sample products for the inventory to see, because I want to feel it before I sell it, obviously. And so some things were so incredible. I'm like, yes, that rocks. And sometimes they would get an early version of that. So the Patreon people, they already have some of the swag already. And then there's some things that didn't quite turn out well. The first time I ordered a sample of a coaster, it was just it felt like just a cardboard piece of paper. This is not. And then the second time I ordered it from a completely different place, and it looked like it was $50 worth quality wise. And so that's been interesting, but to also kind of play around and talk to the Patreon people, supporters, and be like, hey, what do you think? So that's been pretty fun to go back and forth and get early feedback for that before I actually start selling stuff. And I'm also really excited about the magnets too that are coming. There's a lot coming.
That's amazing. Do you know roughly about how many people you currently have subscribed to your Patreon?
That's a good question. I believe we're just under the 50 people mark. So it's just, I think I need 1 or 2 more people, and then we're at 50 people. So I would love to double that this year. That would be a great goal. So fingers crossed on that.
So our topic for today is reading with intent. So anybody can answer these questions. How would you define reading with intention? So we'll start with our special guest Melody first, and then we'll go around.
Reading with intention. It's always been important to me, but it's always been kind of not a natural thing for me because my parents are both creatives, and they've always given me books that make me think outside of the box. And so for me, I would hope that reading with intention would mean to make it a focus point to just read widely. Especially, I'm a writer. So especially as writers, I feel like any writer listening is kind of doing themselves a disservice by not reading widely and not learning from as many different creative mediums as they can. So as far as what that actually entails, I would say, let's, start with text. Are you only reading novels, or are you reading short stories, novellas, anthologies, graphic novels, manga, poetry, plays, screenplays? You have to really dig around. And then onto genre. I mean, obviously anybody can read whatever genre they want to read, but are you also reading different genres within fiction, different genres within nonfiction? Don't forget about nonfiction, because there's a ton of great stuff that you can learn from nonfiction, especially if you're doing research. You don't want to just read nonfiction when you're doing research for stuff. You can also read it outside of that as well. And then when it comes to format, are you only reading books that are physical copies or ebook copies, or are you also listening to audiobooks? I mean, yeah, I'll admit audiobooks are hit or miss if the narrator is not, quite hitting the mark for you. But if you find that audiobook narrator that you love, like hold on to them, listen, like Google them and see what other books that they've narrated so that you can keep up with those books that you enjoy listening to. Because nobody wants to listen to a book for 18 hours if it's not by a narrator you don't hear. But yeah, are you only reading new books that come out, or are you also reading backlist, especially as a writer and even as a reader? I think it's fun to read books by some of my favorite authors now and see what they wrote earlier on, to see not only how their writing grew, but how their expansion of the world grew. So that's kind of fun to see. And then also, like, are you only reading books that are coming out by like the big 5 or 4 or whatever it is now? Or are you also reading mid-list publishers books or indie books? Are you reading books by other people, by BIPOC authors, Indigenous authors, queer people from backgrounds that are not just your own, work that explores neurodiversity, disability, religions that are not your own, just reading widely. So it entails, for me, it entails a lot. I know for a while there, YA was kind of really stuck on trilogies, but are you reading duologies? Are you reading standalones? Like, reading widely entails so many things, and reading with intention entails making sure that you are doing your part to not just read, YA fantasy or just YA contemporary for like the whole year, So that's my very long answer.
I love that you mentioned audiobook narrators, because that has definitely opened up for me. I've hooked myself to a narrator and I've read everything that they've narrated, and opened up a bunch of different genres for me just because I like their voice.
Yeah.
For me, reading with intention, I think of it from the perspective of like the actual book that you're planning on, like, reading in that moment, kind of like setting yourself up for what you're hoping to get out of that experience of reading that book. And I see it in a couple different examples. Like for me, like sometimes, like if I'm having like, really bad day, like really like a lot of stuff going on in my life, I'll turn to a book that I've read so many times because I know exactly what to expect from it. Like I know how it's going to end. I know how it's going to make me feel. So I'm, putting myself in the position of just like, okay, like I feel pretty down right now. So I'm going to do this thing that like makes me happy. But on the flip side of that also, if it's a book that, I haven't read yet, or if it's something on, a topic that I might not know a lot about, my intention of reading that is that I'm hoping to gain a new experience. I'm hoping to learn something from that. So it's about kind of like setting up for yourself, like what are your goals? What are your plans for that journey through that book? And if the answer is you don't know like what to expect, that's fine too. You can just go in like blindly surprised. Like, so like I've started recently just reading books like without even reading the synopsis. I'm just like, what? Like, what's the worst that happens? If I don't like it, I can stop it. And, I can also just finish it, even if it's not my jam, but just finish it. You never know what you're going to get from it. You're going to take something away from every book. If you say that you like don't get something from a book, you're lying, because you get something from it, even if it's not exactly what you were expecting. So for me, that's what I think of when I think about reading with attention. I think about, what exactly are you hoping to take away from that?
I love that. Yeah. For me, reading with intention is thinking about what you're reading and also paying attention to what you're reading. Like in school, when you read with intention, you're like, what am I getting out with this? Aiming for, I'm writing a paper. But now as an adult, I'm not writing papers. So I'm like, what am I missing in what I'm reading? All through high school, I read YA fantasy, and it was like pretty formulaic back then. Like you knew what you were getting. And now I'm like, there's so much more that I haven't read. And there's just so much more being published where I'm like, I want this and I want this. And then I'm like, all right, well, I've read 5 YA fantasy books because that's what I'm always going to go to. But all the protagonists were like totally different races, different religions, different like sexualities. I'm like, this is cool, but it's still fantasy. So like taking that break and be like, when is the last time you read realistic fiction? Go read one of those. And I'm also on the reference desk with the adults. So I'm like, oh, I have no idea what's going on in adult publishing ever. So like trying to like force myself to read something in adult too, be like, I can give you a book recommendation from something I've read instead of like, let me use one of our 8 resources to give you a recommendation instead. So knowing where your blind spots are, like I cannot help you if you want an adult mystery, but I'm trying to be better about that and knowing like where you need work and then going and reading it, or at least reading summaries.
Yeah, I'm definitely the opposite of you, Chris. I read more realistic fiction. I need to read more fantasy.
I have recommendations for you.
Oh, there we go. And then we help each other out that way too.
What do readers gain when they read with intention?
I would say, I mean, we've all heard that bit about how books are mirrors that reflect the world we see and us, and then windows help us observe and appreciate the world around us. It's so true. Whether or not you are creative, if you're looking to expand your mind and grow as a human being, reading is one way to do that. And I see like choosing not to read widely, if you're able to take advantage of that, it's kind of like you're taking for granted the freedom that comes with challenging yourself to think about the world, how it operates, and your place in that operation, so to speak. I would say readers, gain knowledge and compassion and an expansion of their imagination when you choose to read widely. It forces you to think and forces you to make a choice and not stand by when other people are put in challenging situations in real life because of ignorance and discrimination, because you've allowed yourself to read across different mediums in various ways, and you're teaching yourself in different ways how to react in real life. And I think that's a skill and a gift that is definitely not to be taken for granted.
I think readers definitely gain empathy when reading with intent. When you're reading someone that's not like yourself, you're stepping into someone else's shoes. You know if the story is told in first person, you are feeling out the character. What's their life, what's their story, their family background, their religion, sexuality. You're just in that character's mindset. And I think it definitely, besides being mirrors, it shows empathy towards other groups of people too.
No, I agree with that. With what you were saying, Cecilia. Definitely, it just you gain new experiences. You gain a different perspective that you may not have known, or one that you just never could experience. Like, for example, just today I finished reading 𝒕𝒐𝒅𝒂𝒏𝒄𝒄, the story about trans Black teenager, and as a cisgendered white male, like I can't necessarily identify with that, but reading his story from his perspective, at least I'm able to have a glimpse into his life and what he's experiencing it, and I feel I've just gained a different perspective, and now I'm really glad that I had that experience with this character. So these experiences are really what's important, and what you could really gain.
I think it's especially important for YA books too, because teens' brains are developing at this period in time, and like kind of showing them these stories of people that are other than themselves will push that empathy in their head and make them, grow into adults in the future that have strong empathy.
Yeah, I agree with that. A lot of the books that I've been reading recently, on more than one occasion, I've said to myself, like, wow, I really wish I had this book when I was a teenager, because, we're all, like you said, it's such a formative time. We're all figuring things out, and, having all those different opportunities to gain all those different experiences is so important. And opening yourself up to such a wide variety of different stories and journeys is so important in helping develop your own identity, I would say.
I agree with definitely the empathy, and also like teenagers, their bubble, it could only be just where they live, where they've never met anyone that didn't grow up like them, live in the same town as them, has never gone out. So it's a chance to see worlds and like parts of the worlds that they've never seen, which literally could just be like a 20-minute car ride from them, depending on where they live, where it's like totally different. And you're like, oh, like for like where we are, we're like, New York's only an hour and a half. But that doesn't mean like everyone's gone to New York and been like there in our area. So they can see totally different lifestyles and have this chance to interact with people that are different than them, even if they can't physically go anywhere from where they currently are. And also think about like other people's experiences and see that as well. And also maybe like they're the only person in their town. They're like, I'm the only LGBT person that I know of in my small town. But hey, there's books. I'm not alone. There's other people with me. So it's a chance for them to see like, yeah, I'm here, but the world's bigger and there's more people out there like me or that are different from me depending on how they're feeling.
That's such a great point that you mentioned that, because it reminds me of when I was younger. I'm originally from Maplewood, but I've moved a lot around, in my life. And Maplewood is wildly diverse. Like, I was just so lucky there. And I was also I've always been an avid reader. So I was always an avid reader as well, in addition to that. And then going from that to, I also moved for a very brief amount of time. We were not there long, to Howell, which was like completely white. There was only 4 Black people in my entire school at that time. And one of the other person was my sister. So it was just, they were all very sheltered. They were not reading, whether it was a child or an adult or not. They were not, as far as I came across, big readers. So it was kind of like a 2-for-1 in a sense that they were not getting that knowledge and that experience and that just anything. They were not getting any life, just being in that sheltered environment. So even if you are in a neighborhood that's like only one kind of group of people, at least if you're reading, at least if you have those books, you can take yourself there. If you're not able to hop on the train and go to New York or wherever you need to go, the books will help you in that time that you're not able to go out.
So what is your experience with reading with intention? Are there any books that you discovered by doing this?
Well, my dad is a comic book illustrator, and he does that kind of stuff. So I've always kind of, and then my mom sings, but I've always kind of been handed books that are either books for Black little kids like me, or just books that were not white, focused on white people, or just different mediums, different ways to read. And so it never really occurred to me to read any other kind of way. And so it's hard to kind of answer this question, but I will say that as I grew older, there would come times where I'm very much a mood reader. And so instead of kind of just reading whatever I wanted to read, I would make it a point where I would say, okay, for the month of January, I'm only reading graphic novels. For the month of February, I'm only reading memoirs. For the month of March, I'm only reading this. And so I could still be a mood reader, but I would have a focus point. And in reading more graphic novels over the years, because I didn't really quite read them at first, because I was like, oh, my dad does comics, like that's his job. And I was like, that's his world, like I don't need to be a part of that, which was hysterical because I grew up going to comic conventions all the time. Comics were around me my entire life. I was like, that's his thing, But if you're reading with intention to read widely, then you can find out things about yourself that you didn't realize. I found out that I particularly am not moved by YA contemporary necessarily, but if you put it in a graphic novel, I'll go through that so fast and I will love it. And so I found that I kind of like different genres if they're presented in a certain way. So I think just playing around with reading different things, different ways will help you open up yourself. So I think it's really about just discovering how you can best take in information was my discovery.
So when I first accepted this job, I was getting into reading YA again, and I came upon From Twinkle with Love by Sunday and Menon. And the main character is going to film school, and that's what I went to school for. So I kind of connected that way. And then I started getting into being interested in the Indian culture that's involved in it. And I ended up kind of going through her whole collection. And at that point, I was like, well, I really enjoy learning about different cultures. What else is there of Southeast Asian writers? So I got into a match made in Mohindi and read just everything about different cultures, listening to audiobooks with different narrators that are also own voices, and got really into reading a lot of own voices stories and realized that I actually really like contemporary romance as well, which is not what I was into when I was younger. I was more into the paranormal fantasy Twilight books. Made me realize I have a different reading intention as an adult as I did when I was a teenager. So discovered a wide range of books that way.
For me, I only really got into YA somewhat recently because I come from a children's background. I've been a children's librarian for about 5 years now, and only recently have I in a role where I still do children's, but I also do YA. So it's something that I kind of, in my own life, I kind of just skipped over that phase of my reading journey. I kind of went straight from like middle grades to basically just like adult books. And even then, like not really, I somewhere along the way, I kind of like lost my love for reading. It wasn't until I came to the library and started working that I kind of rediscovered that love. So only recently have I really like been diving into YA. For me, kind of the turning point was, I was just looking for different popular YA books. I was kind of just like making my way through them. And I got to Heartstopper by Alice Oseman, her graphic novel series. And at first, like, I really loved it just because it was like really cute and like really fluffy, and it just made me happy. But as I started to like go through it, she's up to her 4th volume now. She just published her 4th volume. I had never felt so, it sounds like a cliche, but I never felt so seen before until I got to that 4th edition, because it deals with a lot of mental health stuff, which, I have my own journey with that. So it was like really, I had just never felt so moved by a book before, truly, and just never in that way before. So from there, it's like I felt such a connection with it. And then for me, that really kind of launched me into my love for graphic novels. I've devoured so many graphic novels, and also I've devoured a lot of LGBT books, a lot of queer literature. It's really kind of set me on a journey with that, and I've just been devouring it ever since. So I definitely, and it kind of goes back to what I said a little bit earlier about just like, these are the books I just wish that I had growing up and when I was younger. And not to say that they weren't there, but just, not quite on the level that it is now. I feel like more and more we're seeing such a wide variety of topics, a wide variety of voices. And yeah, it's really amazing what, one piece of literature can do, like how it can set you on this kind of journey.
For me, when I was like a teenager reading, I wanted like that escapism of fantasy of like the girl gets to go away to a whole different world. And now I'm like, I have read all of that a million times. And 2, like anything's like realistic fiction, like quirky female protagonist in like the school falls in love. I'm like, I have lived this. I don't want to go back to high school. Don't want to go back to middle school. It happened. Don't want it. So now I'm like, I want other people's experiences. I already lived this. I want to see from other people's perspectives. And like, especially with fantasy, like so much fantasy is like Greek mythology and like Arthurian legend, where I'm like, I know where this is going. I've read 20 different versions of this in high school. So like the fact that there's so much more diverse, like I'm going to keep coming back to fantasy because it's what I read a lot of, like cultures and like mythologies that are out there that weren't getting attention before. I'm like, I don't know where this is going. I can't tell you the end from the first chapter. So like getting to see that and like getting to experience other people's perspectives is great. And like, it feels like fantasy opened up for like way further than it was for me, where I'm like, there's so much more out there and there's so much more being published that you can get a hold of easily now, where I'm like, yes, give me more. Like I'm no longer like burned out on fantasy. And like, that's why I'm back to like starting to read some realistic fiction too, where I'm like, cool, there's like other protagonists. It's not like I'm a quirky, like cishet white girl. I'm like, yes, give me other things. And like being able to give teenagers to other things, like read this.
I love that you mentioned different perspectives, and kind of like I read this all before in high school, because when you do go back and you read YA books, you get to see how other people's high school experiences were, because we are in tunnel vision when we're in high school. It is all about us. Nobody else matters. Sure, we have friends and we care, but do we really know what's happening in their lives? No. And so to read these books, especially contemporary books, where it's just basics, down to the basics, we strip away all of the fantastical elements of it, and we just get focused on the reality of the situation. This is what I'm going through. And if you read certain books, you're like, oh my God, you might realize something that happened in your life that you may have completely ignored, or you might have a connection with somebody else and you kind of see, in a sense, what they were going through that you didn't even really think about until you read this book. And so I think that definitely helps, because we finally begin to understand the people closest to us or around us, or if they're not close to us anymore, we still have a better understanding of what they may have gone through in a time where we had no idea what they were going through, and they may have been sitting right next to us in English class that whole year. We didn't know, So it's a gift to be able to have that knowledge. Even if it's later in life, it's still a gift to be able to get that knowledge.
What are the larger benefits to society reading with intention? I know we kind of touched on that a little bit.
Yes. So while we did touch on it a bit, I do want to add, we can kind of see, to kind of twist the question a little bit, we can kind of see the benefit of people who don't read widely or with intention, because it's happening right now. Books are getting banned by Black YA authors just because they're Black. And they have nothing to do with anything that needs to be banned, or whatever that means. But because white people are so, not everybody, but these people who are intentionally trying to ban these books are so intent on not having the truth be shared, because we all know knowledge is power. We all know people share truth in writing, in books, and they are so terrified of the truth of what white people have done in the past to be spread in these books that they're just going to ban them all. And so I think the benefit of reading with intention is understanding what you're trying to ban, first of all, and realizing that there's no reason to ban it. These people probably have not read a single book since Gone Girl came out. You know what I'm saying? So they have no idea what's happening with these books, especially with YA books. The last time they picked up a YA book was probably right before The Hunger Games came out, or right before Twilight came out. Those big monster blockbuster hit books that everybody has to read before the movie comes out. But they're not actual readers, and they don't understand what's involved in these stories. And so I kind of went on a little tangent there. But yeah, I think you definitely have to open up a book before you can understand what benefit or danger is being presented with the book, for sure.
A lot of it's like being more aware of like outside of your own bubble, and like knowing there's more out there, and seeing like the more you experience anything that's different than your own life, the more you understand of it, the more empathy you do have, and the more understanding you have for other people and what's going on, and the more you care. Because like seeing something on the news is like really removed from you, but as soon as you like make any kind of personal connection, you're like, I care because now this affects me. So by reading diverse books and reading with intention, it helps bring whatever's on the news that could be happening across the country from you. Now you feel it and have a connection to it, and now you care more and are more likely to go out and do something, either by donating or like helping out in any way that you can, and being another voice to support anything, like any the causes. So that way more people are involved, and the more notice it gets, the more of effect things are going to have.
But yeah, just with everything going on, it's so clear that there's such a lack of empathy and a lack of understanding, whether it's intentional or unintentional. And books are just such a great medium for learning about other people, learning about different experiences. in a way that might get the message across. Like, and there's so many different types of books, so many, different between nonfiction, fiction, and even just the types of books that are written. Like, there's a type of book for everyone. So even if you're the type of person that thinks like, well, like I'm not the type of person that can gain an understanding from a book because I don't like them, I don't understand them, whatever the reason might be, there's so many different mediums that like surely one of these will connect with you and surely will give you that perspective that you're needing. So yeah, I think that's definitely the benefit, is that we really can all get that empathy that we all so desperately need, especially right now.
Yeah, I think it's important to tell stories that are both hard to hear and joyful stories too, because those are two different sides of the same experience. Making sure to read both those stories, even if they're hard to hear sometimes or hard to read, that's important as well.
How can reading with intention help to promote diverse books to readers that are new to reading diversely?
Once you have a book that you have read and are willing to talk about to other people, as long as they are willing to take that recommendation, that will keep happening. So you have to choose to read outside of what you're comfortable with. And then once you read the book, you have a responsibility, so to speak, to talk about it so that other people can read those books and have those books in your hands. I've been reading Rise Up, How You Can Join the Fight Against White Supremacy by Dr. Crystal M. Fleming. And it's taking me a while to go through it because it's a nonfiction book. It's so much to unpack, but I cannot wait. And I kind of am already talking about it because it's just so good. And I just can't wait to keep talking about it even more. So yeah, you've got to make sure that you are spreading the word about this book. I know we all hate Amazon, but leaving reviews, because those reviews actually matter to people. So leave those reviews on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, wherever you buy the book, so that people can see that not only are people reading the book, but they love it so much that they took the time out of their day to review it. And that is so important. So definitely word of mouth helps promote diverse books, especially since most of the time when we are talking about word of mouth books, it usually are those blockbuster type of books. But at that point, everybody has already heard about the book. So it's important to not just put that enthusiasm into, those big books, but also into the books that you're reading every day that you come across, for sure.
Yeah, I know every time I read something I really enjoy, I just won't shut up about it. And I always make sure when I'm doing displays at the library to include diverse books. Sometimes I have a hard time including other stuff on there because there are so many good diverse books out there. And then when kids come into the library looking for something, I make sure I recommend them authors that either write in the genre. If a girl's coming in for a romance, I pick up Nicola Yoon, and she is a romance writer. You can pick any single one of hers, or Maureen Gu. And I just make sure to promote to the people I have at my doorstep, at my clutches, throw books at them.
Yeah, I think also speaking from the perspective of us as librarians, it kind of all starts with us, especially in our roles as working with teens. We're promoting diverse books, if we're recommending diverse books, if we're promoting the idea of reading with intention, like it starts with us. So like we need to make sure that we're doing our due diligence and making sure that we're reading with intention and exposing ourselves to as many of these types of books as possible. Now, granted, that's not very difficult for especially us because, we love to read. That's one of the many reasons that we're in this profession. But really knowing the books that are in our collection that we have to offer, knowing these different authors, knowing these different genres, and not just knowing like, a couple of key authors off the top of your head, or like a couple of like titles here and there. Like that's good. It's a good start, especially if you're kind of overwhelmed. Like, especially when I first started, I was like, I don't really know much about YA. So that was a good starting point for me. But now that I'm really reading with intention and really, you know, opening myself up and allowing myself to experience these new experiences, now I feel like I'm able to confidently, like, obviously I've been promoting diverse books before, but now I feel like I can confidently, now that I'm actually like really digesting them and taking them in, I can recommend them with a new kind of understanding.
Yeah, I think that's so important, especially as librarians. My high school librarian, she created a book club. And so I was in a book club, and she would read with intention and recommend with intention. Every few weeks, she would come to me with a book that had a Black main character in it, or near supporting character in it that was very relevant in the story. And the book was always written by a person of color. And this was a while ago. So for someone back then to be doing that, I've just been so lucky in that sense. I know everybody doesn't have that, but librarians are so important when it comes to recommending books. Like the power, the power that you have to change so many lives just by putting a book in their hands. It's just bananas. It's magic. It really is.
For me, when I read a book, I tend to think of like what bigger series it connects to, because we always have the customers, especially for me, we have like some real intense readers where I'm like, you've read everything that's building somehow, of like, all right, well, you've read The Hunger Games, you've read Divergent, you've read like all the big name series. All right, here's some things that you haven't heard of a million times in the news. And like, I look for books that I'm like, this matches to this popular book. So I can be like, well, you read that, you liked it. This is really similar. And here's why it's similar. And then they're reading things that they wouldn't have like necessarily, like, it's still the genre you want. It's still like the same like themes, but you've got diverse protagonists that you wouldn't have been reading if you hadn't been thinking about them necessarily or going for them, or even really notice that you weren't reading this whole chunk of books that match the same themes. So I've been using that to be like, hey, oh, you liked this cute like romance. Here's another cute romance author, and like matching them up of like, oh, these themes you liked character driven. This is character driven. Read them, and like once that door gets like cracked open, you can start like being like, here, you read that, and now this book is similar to that book that you got recommended that was similar to this book, and now you're going off into the world of reading even more books that are more diverse than you had really originally thought of when you're just like, I want another Hunger Games.
I kind of imagine with that like a web or a Venn diagram of like circles within circles of like, well, this is to Hunger Games, to this is Divergent. You mix those together, you get this.
Just start putting like the strings on the wall, mapping and be like, this is how they're connected. I promise there's some relation, even though you're like 6 books out at this point.
I definitely will, if kids come in and they recommend a book to me, I will definitely like be like, oh, what is this about? Or if they come in and they're looking for a specific genre, I'll start kind of reading that genre to see if I can get some more recommendations for them as well, and create book lists and displays. We have an LGBTQ display here, so I can kind of see what types of books keep going out and read more of those, read what the kids are reading.
I've enlisted a couple of my teens to like do some of my reading for me now, where I'm like, I figured out what you like. This is similar. Read this and get back to me on what you feel about it. Or I'm like, I do not have time to read this. And like, we have like, because we have multiple librarians on our desk for YA, or I'm like, we have a list where like, hey, this kid's looking for more of these, and we'll just add things to like these running lists to be like, hey, you came last time and we only had like 3 books. However, we combined 3 different people's brains and we have 20 books on our list now. So I definitely love making book lists where I'm like, here, you started here, and now we're very far from where you started. Like,
I love when a kid leaves, they ask for one specific book and we don't have it, and then they leave with 20 books because we didn't have the one book that they had.
That's amazing. I love that. As someone who has been there, I love walking out with that stack.
I love watching kids walk by either from the manga section or like they're checking out every single romance from something, and they have like the entire series and just seeing that empty shelf space where it used to be. And just being like, well, I guess someone checked out all of Naruto again.
What changes have you noticed in the books being published once you started reading with intention?
Well, not necessarily when I started reading with intention, because that's been a through line for me. But I will say that in recent years, once publishers started making intentional business choices, I've noticed that Nicola Yoon and David Yoon, they have an imprint now, a YA romance imprint specifically for BIPOC authors. Like, that's incredible. That we would not have seen that if certain things hadn't happened, unfortunately. I believe Kwame Alexander has an imprint, versify, and even Rick Riordan has an imprint that specifically is there to, because we all know the Greek mythology stories, but other cultures have mythology stories too. So for him to do that, he knows his influence in this industry, and he did something about it. And that's incredible. So I would say people who know their influence, know their power, and do something with that power, that is incredible. And that's what I've noticed in the past handful of years. People who are being offered these opportunities, finally long overdue opportunities, or who have been there for God knows how long, and they're cis white males, and they know, hey, I can do something about this. And they actually help, and they're true allies. So I've just noticed people who are true allies stepping up and doing the work in a big way, but not being like showy about it. Like, I did this, I did that. There's kind of nothing worse than an ally who's like, hey, I'm a good ally, right? Just, be quiet, do the work, and the work will speak for itself. So yeah, that's what I would say I've noticed over the past few years.
I would say the one thing I've noticed, just kind of like looking at like the new books that come in, especially like over the past year or two, I feel like this younger generation, like I feel like they're a lot more open and like willing to discuss a lot more things. So I find that in a good way, I feel like a lot of the books that come in like really aren't afraid to tackle those really difficult issues, especially like the amount of books that we see coming in that specifically talk about the Black experience, Black Lives Matter, police brutality, all these things that have been at the forefront in the recent past. It's so great to see these stories. It's obviously not great that there's a specific need for these stories, but the fact that they're able to release these stories and tell these stories and aren't afraid to have these conversations and to open up people's minds, and even not just that, other topics as well. It's a really great thing. And not to say that other authors or books haven't tackled difficult issues, but just now it's great to see that they're really focusing on current events, and it's putting the world around us into a different kind of perspective through this medium, which I think is a really cool and important thing.
One of the things I've been noticing talking about books coming in is the covers have been different. Seeing Black characters on the covers, even thinking about Nicola Yoon's Everything, that didn't have the Black protagonist on the cover. And now seeing one of the more recent books, has one of the most beautiful covers I've ever seen, This Poison Heart. She's a Black girl on the cover, and just seeing more and more of representation literally in your face on the cover is just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it's definitely seeing the covers and like the change in the covers, and also just the amount of names and authors that are out there. Like, I feel like when I was like a teenager and a kid, there's like 5 authors I could think of that were Black, and then now I'm like, there's a ton. There's so many more diverse authors out there, and also I feel like the ones that were getting promoted when I was a kid was like Rita Williams Garcia and Walter D. Myers, who are fantastic writers, but they were like hard life, like this is what it's about, like dark and gritty, and you're like, well, I don't want to read that. But then like now there's like a ton of Black authors, and like we have authors that are hitting all those things, and we also have authors like Nicola Yoon where it's like, it's just cute fluffy romance. You don't have to be like, oh, this is the only thing you're seeing in representation. Is a whole bunch of other stuff too. You can have just a cute romance. You can have like a fantasy protagonist. Like I really enjoyed the Dread Nation, where I'm like, yes, go hunt some zombies in like
yes
historical fiction. I was like, this is great. I'm like talking about like that too, and like having that perspective of like the one protagonist's father was the plantation owner at the time, and like addressing that in a YA book instead of like kind of like dancing around it. Like this was a thing that happened. Also, there's zombies, but like, and mix that in with your fantasy, so that you're not like, oh, the only Black authors are writing like gritty, hard life stories.
Yeah, there's a wealth of stories to be told, and I'm just so happy that publishers are. I don't want to say seeing that, because they could have seen that all the time if they chose to, but they're seeing dollar signs now. So, but I'm just so happy that our stories are finally being told, because we've always been here. We've always been telling our stories, but to have our stories told in a way where they can be more easily accessible through a bookstore is just absolutely incredible. And I'm so happy that we're finally here, and this is just the beginning.
I think accessibility is definitely important. Like coming into the library and seeing displays or seeing the books on the shelves, or being able to access them digitally too with your library card is.
Shout out to the Libby app, because it is my savior. I love getting audiobooks and ebooks from there. Oh my goodness. So yeah.
And the other thing I noticed was like, it's not just like a one thing, like the protagonist is Black or the protagonist is LGBT. Like you're getting like a mix of things. Like people have layers. Like they're not one demographic.
Yeah.
And seeing that in books too, of like you can be more than one thing all at once and have to deal with it, and like having that, and then not just like focus is on that topic. It's like, hey, by the way, this is what the character's like. We're gonna go fight zombies or do whatever else is happening. It's not like we're just gonna be like, here, one thing, or we're focused on this topic. It's like there's more going on, and like seeing that there's more going on than like just that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said about people not just being one thing. Everybody's like multifaceted, like, and I feel like a lot of books nowadays are definitely have teens questioning either their gender or sexuality within the book, even to us, like in their heads. And I just think that's what real teens do. So we're showing more of that.
And it's not like ending up like wrapped up in a pretty bow at the end of like,
yes,
they figured out, like at the end they're like, I don't know. I'm like, I'm a teenager. I don't know anything at this point. Who knows what tomorrow's like? I'm like, yeah, no, you're teenagers. Like, you don't need to figure out anything at this point. Like, you need to know the answers to that test that you're taking. Like everything else, you got time. And having like the teens in the books, like, be like, I don't know, I got time. It's great to show. Like, you can change. Like, you don't have your life figured out. Even at 18, when you're graduating high school, you're like, I'm going to college. Probably going to change my major twice.
And that's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
No final thoughts. Just this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was really fun.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us today, Melody. Tell everyone where they can find you online.
I am on Melanin_YA on Twitter, or Melanin in YA on Instagram. And then on Twitter, just Melody Simpson, if you're just trying to follow me personally. And of course, melaninya.com. All the links are there for everything else. Maybe eventually down the line this year, we being me, will start. I have a Melanin YA TikTok, but I have not put anything on it quite yet. But hopefully soon that will happen. But yeah, Instagram and Twitter seem to be the main social media outlets that get attention for Melanin YA. So just digging with that mainly for now. And then of course, melaninya.com.
Awesome. And you can find all those links on our Padlet on our website. Be sure to check out the Ocean County Library's website for more podcasts and events on our website's calendar of events page. All titles mentioned in today's episode can be found through the Ocean County Library free with your library card. Until next time, happy reading.
Support public libraries. Like, share, and subscribe for more great videos.